I woke up at 3 in the morning to a strange noise coming from the yard. Confused, I got up and went to my bedroom window. What I saw left me paralyzed with shock. My son, Mark, and my daughter-in-law, Angela, were in my backyard, a flashlight in hand, burying something in the ground. Their movements were desperate, nervous, as if they were committing a crime. I stood there, hidden behind the curtain, watching the two people I trusted most in the world doing something behind my back in the dead of night. When they finished, they quickly covered the hole and scurried back to the house like thieves in the darkness. I waited until they left for work the next day. My heart hadn't stopped pounding since I saw them. I took a shovel and went directly to the spot where they had been digging. The earth was loose, fresh. I began to dig with trembling hands, not knowing what on earth I was going to find. When I finally pulled out the buried object, I almost fainted from the shock. I couldn't believe what was in front of my eyes. It was something that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, about my life, about the people I had loved and protected for decades. But to understand why what I found shattered my soul, you need to know who I am. My name is Carol. I'm 69 years old, and my whole life I've been the kind of woman who gives everything for her family. The kind of woman who sacrifices without asking for anything in return, who puts the needs of others before her own. Mark came into my life when he was just 3 years old. His mother had died in a car accident, and he was left completely alone in the world. My heart broke when I first saw him in that orphanage, so small, so lost, so in need of love. My husband and I couldn't have biological children, so we decided to adopt him immediately. From that moment on, Mark became the center of my universe. I gave him all the love I had stored in my frustrated mother's heart. I raised him as if he were my own blood, protected him from all harm, and educated him with the best values I could teach him. I worked day and night to give him the best life possible. When he turned 18, I even put this estate in his name as well, so that he would feel completely a part of the family. 3 years ago, he married Angela. At first I liked her. She was a polite, hard-working girl who seemed to genuinely love my son. But over time, I began to notice strange things. Small, derogatory comments about my age, suggestions that maybe it was time for me to consider moving into a nursing home, knowing glances exchanged with Mark when they thought I wasn't looking. My husband died 5 years ago, and since then I've lived alone in this house we built together. A beautiful estate on the outskirts of the city, with 7 acres of land and a country house that is worth a fortune. During these years of widowhood, Mark and Angela began to visit me more frequently. At first, I thought it was because they were worried about me, because they wanted to take care of their widowed mother. How naive I was to believe their intentions were pure. Now, with what I found buried in my yard, everything was starting to make painful sense. For the past few weeks, I had noticed that Mark was nervous, restless. Angela was also behaving strangely, as if they were planning something behind my back. I would hear them whispering in the kitchen, and when I walked in, they would immediately change the subject. I saw them reviewing papers that they would quickly hide when I approached. That night, when I saw them burying something in the middle of the night, all the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in the most terrifying way possible. But what I found buried surpassed all my worst fears. When I pulled that object out of the ground and saw what it really was, I understood that the two people I had trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the most vile way imaginable. What I held in my hands was proof that everything I believed about my family was a lie. Everything I had built for decades was crumbling before my eyes. And this was only the beginning of the nightmare I was about to live. What I found buried in that hole were documents. But not just any documents. They were papers I kept in my personal safe, documents that only I had access to. Papers that should never have left my room. My original will, the property titles to the estate, my life insurance policy, and most disturbingly of all, a letter I had written 2 years ago addressed to a lawyer, where I expressed my suspicion about Mark and Angela's strange behavior. My own hands trembled as I recognized my handwriting on that letter. A letter I never sent, which I kept as a personal outlet, where I wrote about how I had begun to feel that Mark no longer saw me as his mother, but as an obstacle, as a burdensome old woman who stood between him and my inheritance. Now I understood everything. Mark had violated my privacy, had somehow opened my safe, had read my most intimate thoughts, and had decided to bury the evidence so that I could never prove his true intentions. He thought that if those documents disappeared, I would have no way to legally protect myself from whatever they were planning. But he made a fatal mistake. He didn't know that I had copies of all those documents stored in a completely different place. He didn't know that for the past few months, sensing something was wrong, I had begun to take precautions. And he definitely didn't know about the secret bank account I had with over $200,000, the result of the sale of some properties I inherited from my sister last year. Mark was always smart, but he completely underestimated his adoptive mother. He believed I was a foolish and trusting old woman who would swallow any lie he told her. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The next day, when they arrived for lunch, as they did every Sunday, I watched them with completely different eyes. I no longer saw my beloved son and his wife. I saw two predators who had been planning my destruction while I served them food with motherly love. Mark sat at the table with that fake smile I now recognized perfectly. Angela didn't even bother to hide her contempt. She served herself the stew I had prepared with so much care as if it were her right, as if I were her unpaid housekeeper. "Mom," Mark began in a syrupy voice, "Angela and I have been thinking about your situation here at the estate. This house is too big for a single person your age. The maintenance costs must be killing you financially." Angela nodded with false concern. "Yes, Carol. Besides, living so isolated isn't good for you. You should be around people your own age, in a place where you receive the medical attention you need." Their words were like poisoned daggers. They spoke of my future as if I were a burden, as if my well-being were a nuisance they had to solve. But the most painful part was the performance, the way they pretended to care about me, when in reality, they just wanted to get rid of me. "And what do you propose?" I asked in a calm voice, though inside I felt like I was drowning in rage and pain. Mark exchanged a quick glance with Angela before answering. "Well, we've been looking at some very nice retirement homes in the city. Places where you could socialize, where you'd have activities, 24-hour medical care. And of course," Angela added with that venomous smile, "we would take care of selling the estate to pay for all those expenses. You wouldn't have to worry about anything financial ever again." There it was. The entire plan, laid out without any shame. They wanted to lock me in a home and take my property. They wanted me to sell my home, the place where I had been happy with my husband, where I had raised Mark, where I held all my most precious memories. "And what if I don't want to leave my house?" I asked, maintaining my calm even though I felt my heart was going to beat out of my chest. Mark's mask began to crack. His smile became tense, forced. "Mom, don't be stubborn. You're not a young woman anymore. Accidents can happen. What if you fall and no one finds you for days? What if you have a health problem and you're all alone?" Besides, Angela intervened with a harder voice. "Maintaining this estate is costing a fortune. The taxes, the upkeep, the utilities. Your widow's pension doesn't cover any of that. You're living beyond your means." It was incredible how they had calculated every argument to make me feel like a financial and emotional burden, as if my existence were a problem that needed an immediate solution, as if doing what they wanted was the only logical option. "I need time to think about it," I told them finally. Mark slammed his fist on the table, and for the first time, I saw his true face. The face of a man frustrated because his victim wasn't behaving as he expected. "Time for what, Mom? To keep being stubborn? You're not 20 anymore. You can't make decisions as if you're going to live forever." "Mark is right," Angela added in a cutting voice. "At your age, important decisions should be made by younger, more prepared people. People who really understand how finances and future planning work." Their words hit me like slaps. They were treating me as if I were senile, incapable of managing my own life. As if my age were synonymous with mental incapacity, as if being older automatically stripped me of the right to decide my own future. But what hurt the most was that it came from Mark. From the boy I had raised as my own son, to whom I had given all my love, all my effort, all my resources. The boy for whom I had sacrificed my youth, my time, my own dreams. That night, after they left, I stayed up very late, replaying every word of that conversation. Every dismissive gesture, every calculating look, every phrase designed to make me feel small and useless. It was then, that I made the most important decision of my life. If they wanted to play dirty, I was going to teach them how this game was really played, but they had no idea who they were messing with. In the following days, Mark and Angela intensified their psychological campaign against me. It was as if they had interpreted my silence as weakness, as a sign that I was giving in to their demands. They had no idea that every venomous word they spoke only strengthened my resolve to completely destroy them. On Tuesday morning, Angela arrived unannounced with brochures in her hand. She dropped them on my kitchen table as if they were military orders I had to obey without question. "Look, Carol, I've already done all the research for you. These are the 3 best places I found. They have activities for seniors, meals included, permanent medical service. They even have a hair salon inside." She spoke of these geriatric prisons as if she were offering me a vacation at a luxury resort, as if locking me up within 4 walls with other seniors abandoned by their families was the grand prize I had been waiting for my whole life. "They're a bit expensive," she continued with false concern, "but don't worry about that. Once we sell the estate, you'll have enough money to pay for years in advance. There will even be plenty left over for Mark and me to help you with any extra expenses you have." The nerve of it left me speechless. Not only did they want to steal my house, but they had the audacity to talk as if they were doing me a favor, as if keeping the proceeds from the sale was a natural part of taking care of me. "And where will you 2 be living in the meantime?" I asked in a neutral voice. Angela smiled with an expression I knew all too well, the smile of someone who believes they have already won the game. "Well, obviously, we'll stay here until the property is sold. Someone has to look after the house, keep it presentable for potential buyers. Mark is going to take some time off work to dedicate himself completely to the sale. Of course, the perfect plan. Kick me out of my own house while they settled in as the new owners, living comfortably at my expense while I rotted in a nursing home, paid for with the money from my own property. Besides," she added in a harsher tone, "this house needs a lot of repairs before it can be sold for a good price. The roof leaks, the plumbing is old, the garden is neglected. It's going to require a considerable investment to get it into shape." It was incredible how she had gone from feigning motherly concern to openly criticizing my home. The house I had kept immaculate for decades was now, according to her, a disaster that required her saving intervention. That night, Mark arrived with a completely different attitude. He no longer pretended to be the loving son worried about his mother. His mask had completely fallen off. "Mom, enough playing games. Angela and I have made a decision. Next week, you're going to visit the 3 places she selected, and you're going to choose one. It's not a suggestion. It's what's going to happen." His tone was that of someone giving orders to a rebellious employee. He no longer even bothered with sweet words or false arguments. It was pure imposition, pure intimidation. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mark approached me with an expression that frightened me. In his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Absolute contempt. Contempt for the woman who had raised him, who had sacrificed everything for him. "You're not going to refuse, Mom. Because at your age, living alone in this big house, a lot of accidents can happen. The stairs are dangerous for an older person. The floors can be slippery. Medications can be easily confused." His words were barely disguised threats. He was telling me that if I didn't obey voluntarily, they would make sure something happened to me, that my accident would be the perfect excuse to take control of my life and my assets. "Besides," he continued in a chilling voice, "I've already spoken to Dr. Matthews about your mental state. I told him that lately you've been confused, forgetful, making irrational decisions. He's very concerned about your ability to live independently. Dr. Matthews was our family doctor of many years, a man who had always treated me with respect and kindness. The idea that Mark had gone to him to lie about my mental state infuriated me to levels I didn't know existed." "You lied to Dr. Matthews about me?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "I didn't lie about anything. I told him the truth about a 69-year-old woman who refuses to accept the reality of her situation. A woman who thinks she can go on living as if she were 30. That is the very definition of mental deterioration." Angela joined the attack with a cruel smile. "Dr. Matthews completely agrees with us. He says it's very common in people your age. Denial, stubbornness, the inability to make rational decisions. He even mentioned we could get a court order if necessary. A court order. They wanted to have me declared mentally incompetent to legally take control of my assets. They wanted to use the judicial system to steal everything I had built over a lifetime of work and sacrifice. "What retirement are you talking about?" Angela asked with sarcasm when I mentioned my income. "You don't even have a decent pension. You live off Social Security and savings that are almost gone. With what money do you think you can maintain this property?" It was lie after lie. My financial situation was solid, but they had built a complete narrative where I was a broke and demented old woman who needed to be saved from her own decisions. "Mom," Mark said in that condescending voice he used when treating me like a foolish child, "we understand this is difficult for you. The emotional attachment to this house, the resistance to change, but that's why we're here, to help you make the decisions you can no longer make on your own." "Exactly," Angela added. "We love you. That's why we're willing to sacrifice our time and energy to solve this problem." Other children would have just called social services and washed their hands of it. They presented their robbery plan as an act of filial love, as if kicking me out of my house and stealing my inheritance was the greatest sacrifice they could make for me, as if I should be grateful that they were destroying my life with such consideration. That night, after they left, I sat in the living room where I had spent the best moments of my life with my husband, where I had watched Mark grow up, where I had celebrated every one of his achievements, where I had cried for every one of his sorrows as if they were my own. Now that same boy, turned into a 35-year-old man, wanted to erase all those memories. He wanted to turn my home into cash, and me into a burden to be deposited in the cheapest place possible. But I had a secret they didn't know, an ace up my sleeve that was going to completely change the game, and it was time to start playing it. What Mark and Angela didn't know was that for the past 6 months, I had been taking precautions. Every strange conversation, every calculating look, every comment about my age had set off alarms in my head. That's why I had started recording our conversations. I had a small recording device my late husband had bought years ago for his business meetings. I had found it while going through his things and decided to keep it, never imagining that one day I would need it to protect myself from my own son. For the past few weeks, every time Mark and Angela came to visit, I discreetly activated the recorder. I had hours of audio that made their plan to steal my house perfectly clear, their veiled threats, their lies about my mental state, and most importantly, their true feelings toward me. But that wasn't all. The month before, sensing that something bad was coming, I had visited a different lawyer from the one I had used my whole life, one Mark didn't know, in a neighboring city. I had told him the whole situation, and he had helped me protect my assets in the most intelligent way possible. First, I had secretly transferred half of my savings to a bank account at another bank, under the name of a corporation the lawyer had created for me. Second, I had modified my will, leaving everything to a charitable foundation, with the exception of a small sum for Mark. Third, I had prepared a sworn affidavit detailing the threats and the robbery plan they had been developing against me. I also had something else they had never suspected. 8 months ago, my younger sister had died childless, leaving me as the sole heir to a property in the city worth over $500,000. I had decided to keep that inheritance a secret, sensing that one day I would need it as an escape card. That property was already being discreetly remodeled, a luxury apartment in the city center, with 24-hour security, nearby medical services, and most importantly, far from Mark and Angela's clutches. On Friday morning, Mark arrived with papers in hand and an even more aggressive attitude than the week before. He no longer even feigned politeness. He treated me as if I were a rebel who had to be subdued by force. "Mom, the game is over. I brought the application forms for the 3 residences. You're going to fill them out right now, and on Monday, we'll start the visits. No more discussion." He threw the papers on the table as if they were my death sentence forms asking about my medical history, my income, my assets, my responsible family, all designed to categorize me as a social burden that needed to be institutionalized. "And if I refused to sign?" I asked, though the recorder was already running in my pocket. Mark approached me with an expression that chilled my blood. "You're not going to refuse, Mom, Because if you do, tomorrow I'm going to call social services and tell them about your mental deterioration, about how you refuse to eat, how you forget to take your medicine, how you've started having hallucinations." "Hallucinations?" I asked, incredulous. "Yes, Mom. Like that time you told me you saw Dad in the garden, or when you insisted someone had been moving your things. Clearly psychotic behaviors that require immediate medical attention. It was brilliant. He was turning my moments of nostalgia for my dead husband and my justified suspicions about their behavior into symptoms of dementia. He was creating a false history of mental illness that he would use to take away all my rights." Angela entered the kitchen at that moment, as if they had coordinated their performance. "Carol, I've already spoken with the director of Serenity Meadows. It's the nicest of the 3 residences. It has gardens, recreational activities, even a beauty salon. You could move in next week if you wanted." "Next week?" I exclaimed. "Yes," Mark replied impatiently. "We've wasted too much time with your tantrums. Angela and I have plans. We have a life to live. We can't keep wasting our weekends coming here to convince you of the obvious." There was the naked truth. I was a nuisance that interrupted their life plans, an annoying old woman who stood between them and their comfort. They no longer even pretended to care about my well-being. Besides, Angela added cruelly, "At Serenity Meadows, you'll be with people your own age. People who understand what it's like to be old, what it's like to be useless for anything but getting in the way." Her words were like slaps. She was telling me directly that I was no longer good for anything, that my only function in life was to disappear discreetly so as not to bother productive young people. "Is that what I'm worth to you?" I asked in a broken voice. "An old woman who's useless for anything but getting in the way?" Mark sighed with exasperation, as if it were exhausting to have to explain reality to a stupid person. "Mom, it's not about what you're worth. It's about being realistic. You're 69 years old. Your body isn't the same. Your mind isn't the same. It's natural that you need specialized help. What's abnormal is to pretend you can keep living as if you were 40. And we have our own lives," Angela added without a trace of compassion. "Mark works 60 hours a week. I have my job and my responsibilities. We can't be coming here every week to take care of someone who refuses to accept the help she needs." It was incredible how she had managed to turn the situation around. They, who were coming to steal my house, now presented themselves as sacrificial victims who were wasting their time trying to help a stubborn and ungrateful old woman. "And what if I don't want to leave my house?" I asked, emphasizing the word "my." Mark's reaction was explosive. He slammed the table with such force that the glasses jumped. "Enough. I'm sick of your whims. This house is too much for you, period. The expenses are too much for your miserable pension, period. Your mental health is deteriorating, period. Either you sign those papers voluntarily, or I'm going to sign them with a court order declaring you incompetent." "Mark is right," Angela intervened in a chilling voice. "We've been far too patient with you. Other children would have had you forcibly committed months ago, but we're giving you the chance to do it with dignity. With dignity. They wanted me to thank them for robbing me of my house with dignity. They wanted me to celebrate the fact that they were destroying my life in a civilized manner. And what if I say I don't have financial problems?" I asked. "What if I show you that I can perfectly maintain this property?" Mark laughed sarcastically. "With what money, Mom? Your bank account has less than $10,000. The property taxes on this place are $4,000 a year. Basic maintenance costs at least $2,000 a year. Utilities another $1,500. Your pension is $800 a month. Do the math. How can you maintain this?" It was obvious he had been investigating my finances, probably illegally accessing my bank information. But he didn't know about my secret account, or my sister's inheritance, or the investments I had made with the lawyer. "Mom," he said in that condescending voice, "I now hated with all my soul. We understand it's hard to accept that you can't take care of yourself anymore. But that's why we're here, to make the tough decisions that you can no longer make." That was the last straw. Seeing my adopted son, the one I had raised with so much love, treating me as if I were a mental invalid, gave me the strength I needed to execute my plan. "All right," I said finally. "You're right. Maybe it's time for me to finally retire. Mark and Angela exchanged a triumphant smile. They thought I had finally given in, that they had broken my resistance. They had no idea I had just declared war. I said I'll retire. For good, I repeated in a firm voice, watching their faces light up with malicious satisfaction. They thought they had won. They didn't know I had just activated the most devastating phase of my counterattack. That same afternoon, after they left celebrating their supposed victory, I called my lawyer. James, it's time to execute the plan. I want everything we've prepared to be activated tomorrow morning. The next day, very early, a moving company arrived at my house. They were discreet, professional, and in a few hours, they packed all my most valuable belongings. My jewelry, my important documents, my family memories, everything that truly mattered to me. They sent it directly to my new apartment in the city. Then I drove to the bank where I had my secret account and withdrew $50,000 in cash, the money I would need for the coming months while I executed my revenge. Mark and Angela believed I was a destitute old woman. They were about to find out how wrong they were. My new apartment in the city was spectacular. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modern kitchen, a terrace with a city view, 24-hour security, and most importantly, it was in my name under a corporation that Mark could never trace. It was my secret fortress, my base of operations for the war that was about to begin. On Monday morning, Mark arrived at the estate, expecting to find me sadly packing my things to go to the nursing home. Instead, he found a note taped to the front door. Gone to reflect on my retirement. I'll be back when I'm ready. Don't look for me. According to my neighbor Linda, Mark went crazy. He was yelling, cursing, desperately calling on the phone trying to locate me. Angela came running, and together they searched the entire house for clues to my whereabouts. What they didn't find was my new will, my legal documentation, or my recordings. Everything was safe in my secret apartment. What they did find was the house completely empty of my valuable belongings and a bank account with exactly $1,200, the minimum I had left, so they wouldn't suspect I had other resources. For 3 days, Mark called my cell phone obsessively. At first, with that sweet, worried voice he used when he wanted to manipulate me. "Mom, we're so worried. Where are you? Are you okay? Come home. We can talk about all this." When I didn't respond to those calls, the tone changed radically. The voicemails became aggressive, threatening. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're 69 years old. You can't be wandering around like a rebellious teenager. Come back immediately or we're calling the police." On the 4th day, I decided to answer one of his calls. My voice sounded tired, defeated, exactly as I wanted it to sound. "Mark, son, you're right. I can't keep running from reality. I'm in a cheap hotel here in the city, spending the last of the savings I have left. I can't do this anymore. What hotel are you in?" "We're coming to get you right now," he replied with relief. "No, don't come. I'll come back to the estate tomorrow. But I need you to promise me something. I need 1 more week to say goodbye to my house, to emotionally process what's happening. 1 week, and then I'll sign all the papers you want." Mark agreed immediately. 1 week seemed a small price to pay to finally get what he wanted. He didn't know that 1 week would be enough to completely destroy his life. On Friday, I returned to the estate, but not alone. I arrived in a luxury car service, dressed in expensive clothes I had bought in the city, with my hair professionally styled and a completely different attitude. I was no longer the defeated old woman they had been humiliating for months. Mark and Angela were waiting for me in the living room, with the nursing home papers ready on the table. Their triumphant expressions vanished when they saw me walk in. Something in my posture, in my gaze, in my energy told them that something had fundamentally changed. "Mom, you look different," Mark said with a certain mistrust. "I feel different," I replied, with a smile I hadn't shown in months. "I've had time to think, to reflect on my life, on my decisions, on the people who truly love me." Angela frowned. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that during these days, I've remembered something very important. I've remembered who I really am. I am not the useless, broke old woman you want me to believe I am. I am Carol Garcia, owner of 2 properties, with a solid bank account and a network of contacts you can't even imagine. I watched their faces pale as they processed my words. Mark stood up abruptly. "What are you talking about? What 2 properties? What solid bank account?" I took a document out of my purse that I had prepared, especially for this moment. It was the title to my apartment in the city, fully paid for, valued at $500,000. I inherited this property from my sister 8 months ago. I thought maybe I should mention it to my dear adopted son, but then I remembered he's so busy planning how to steal my house that he probably wouldn't be interested in my other assets. The word adopted hit them like a slap. Mark was paralyzed, processing the fact that I knew about the documents he had buried, about his attempt to hide his true legal status in the family. "How? How do you know about that?" he stammered. "About your adoption? I've always known, dear. I was the one who adopted you, remember? What I didn't know was that you had found the original documents and had decided to bury them in my yard so that I couldn't legally use them against you." Angela stood up as if she had seen a ghost. "That's impossible. Those documents are buried?" "No, not anymore. I dug them up the same morning I saw you hiding them, and not only that, I photographed them, scanned them, sent them to my lawyer, and stored them in a safe deposit box, along with the recordings of all our conversations from the past few weeks." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark and Angela looked at each other with absolute panic, finally understanding that their victim had turned out to be much smarter and more prepared than they had ever imagined. "Recordings," Mark whispered in a broken voice. "Recordings where you threaten me with accidents if I don't obey. Recordings where you plan to steal my house. Recordings where you insult me, humiliate me, and treat me like trash. Recordings where Angela says I'm good for nothing but getting in the way." I watched as the reality of their situation began to sink into their brains. They had completely underestimated their victim, and now all their poisonous words, all their threats, all their criminal plans were legally documented. "Mom, we can explain everything. It wasn't our intention," Mark began desperately. "It wasn't your intention to what? To rob me? To threaten me? To lie to Dr. Matthews about my mental health? To plan to have me declared incompetent to take control of my assets?" Each question was a direct stab to the heart of their criminal plan. I knew exactly everything they had done, everything they had planned, and I had the evidence to prove it. Angela tried one last, desperate resort. "Carol, you don't understand. We were only trying to help you. Everything we did was for your own good." I laughed, a laugh that hadn't come from my throat in months. A genuine, liberating, powerful laugh. For my own good? Stealing my house is for my own good? Locking me in a nursing home against my will is for my own good? Lying about my mental health is for my own good? Mark tried to approach me, but something in my expression stopped him cold. "I am not the same woman you thought you could manipulate," I said in a voice of steel. "Now, I am your worst nightmare." "Our worst nightmare?" "Mom, you're exaggerating all this," Mark said, trying to regain control of the situation, but his voice was trembling. "Sit down. Let's talk like civilized adults." "Civilized adults?" I repeated ironically. "Like when you threatened me with accidents on the stairs? Or like when your wife told me I was useless for anything but getting in the way?" I took out my phone and pressed play on one of the recordings. Mark's voice filled the room. "At your age, living alone in this big house, a lot of accidents can happen. The stairs are dangerous for an older person." I watched Mark collapse onto the sofa as he heard his own threatening words played back with perfect clarity. Angela went as white as a sheet. "Shall I continue?" I asked with a smile that made them tremble. I pressed play again. This time it was Angela's voice. "You'll be with people your own age, people who understand what it's like to be old, what it's like to be useless for anything but getting in the way." This is illegal," Angela stammered. "You can't record private conversations without our consent." "Illegal?" I laughed. "My dear, I am in my own home. I can record whatever I please. But you know what is illegal? Threatening an older person, planning to steal their property, lying to a doctor to falsely declare someone mentally incompetent." Mark stood up abruptly, his loving son mask completely gone. "What do you want? Money? Is that it? Tell us how much you want to forget all this." "Money?" I exclaimed, incredulous. You think after everything you've done, after all the humiliations, after planning to steal my house, you think this is solved with money? Angela tried another approach. Carol, we're family. Families forgive each other. They overcome problems together. We can't destroy each other over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated in a chilling voice. Planning to have me declared mentally incompetent is a misunderstanding? Threatening me with physical accidents is a misunderstanding? I took another document out of my purse. It was a copy of the report my lawyer had prepared, detailing all the legal elements of elder abuse that Mark and Angela had committed. This document is already in the hands of the district attorney. Psychological abuse of an elder, threats of violence, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted illegal appropriation of assets. Do you know how many years in prison these charges carry? Mark completely deflated. Mom, please. I'm your son. You raised me. You loved me. You can't do this. My son? I asked, my voice broken but firm. My son would never have threatened me. My son would never have planned to rob me. My son would never have treated me like trash. You are not my son. You are a stranger who lived in my house for 30 years pretending to love me. The words came from the depths of my pain, each syllable loaded with years of unrequited love, unvalued sacrifices, and silent humiliations. You raised a monster who turned against you, I added, looking him straight in the eye. A monster who saw his adoptive mother as a walking bank account. Angela tried to regain lost ground. Okay, maybe we were wrong in how we approach things, but we can fix it. We can go to family therapy. We can… Family therapy? I interrupted. For what? So a psychologist can explain to me why my son wants to steal my house? To teach me how to better accept threats of physical violence? I walked to the window where I had seen them burying the documents on that fateful morning. It had all started there, with that image of betrayal that was forever etched in my retina. Do you know what the most painful part of all this is? I asked without turning around. It's not that you want to steal my money. It's not that you want the house. It's that you never really loved me. For 30 years, you pretended to love me while you waited for me to die to inherit my assets. That's not true, Mark protested weakly. I turned to him with an expression that made him flinch. It's not true? Then explain to me why you never come to visit me out of love, only when you need something. Explain to me why all your conversations revolve around my age, my limitations, my uselessness. Explain to me why your first reaction when I told you I was lonely was to think about how to take advantage of my vulnerability. The silence that followed was devastating. They had no answers because they knew that every word I had said was absolutely true. Besides, I continued in a harder voice, there's something else you don't know. Doctor, Matthews never believed your lies about my mental state. I watched Mark pale as he understood the implications. That's right. I went to see him personally. I showed him the recordings where you all planned to use his lies to declare me incompetent. He is furious. A respected doctor whose professional reputation you wanted to use to validate your criminal lies. Mark stood up, staggering. What did you tell him? The truth. That my adopted son and his wife have been planning a legal fraud using his name and reputation. That you lied to him about my mental health to get false medical documentation that you would use in court. Doctor, Matthews had indeed been furious when I told him everything, not just because of the lies, but because they had tried to make him an unwilling accomplice in a legal fraud. Doctor, Matthews has already filed a report correcting all the false information you gave him, I continued. And he has also provided a complete medical evaluation, confirming that I am perfectly capable, mentally and physically, of handling my own affairs. Angela began to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic as she realized all their lies were simultaneously unraveling. Carol, please, we can fix this. We can give you everything back. We can… Give me back what? I interrupted. Are you going to give me back the dignity you took from me? Are you going to give me back the nights of sleep I lost worrying about your threats? Are you going to give me back the trust I had in my family? I walked to the table where the nursing home forms they had brought still lay. I took them and tore them into small pieces before their eyes. This is what I think of your plans to lock me in a home. I said as the pieces of paper fell to the floor. And this is what I think of you as a family. Mark tried one last desperate resort. Mom, I'm your son. You adopted me when I was 3. You raised me. You educated me. You loved me. All of that has to mean something. It meant everything to me, I replied, my voice broken but firm. That's why it hurts so much. Because I truly loved you like my own son. Because I would have given my life for you without hesitation. Because every one of your achievements I felt as my own. Every one of your pains hurt me more than if it were mine. I saw my words hit him like punches. But you turned that love into a weakness. You used my motherly affection to manipulate me. You interpreted my generosity as stupidity. And worst of all, you interpreted my age as an opportunity. It's not like that, Mom. I swear it's not like that, he pleaded. It's not? Then explain this recording, I said, pressing play one more time. This time it was Mark's voice telling Angela, when the old woman dies, we're going to be rich. This property is worth a fortune. The silence that followed was absolute. Mark collapsed as if he had been shot in the chest. I recorded this conversation a month ago when you thought I was taking a nap. You were in the kitchen, planning my death as if it were a convenient financial event. The devastation on their faces upon hearing that final recording was absolute. Mark covered his face with his hands, knowing there was no escape. Angela was sobbing, not from remorse but from pure panic at the realization that her future had just collapsed. Please, Mom, Mark implored. We can explain. We were speaking hypothetically. We didn't mean hypothetically? I interrupted in a voice of steel. Planning my death to take my inheritance is speaking hypothetically? Referring to me as the old woman is a term of endearment? I took out my phone again and dialed a number I had been waiting to use for weeks. James? It's Carol. Yes, I have the confessions we needed. Activate everything immediately. Mark jumped to his feet. Who are you talking to? My lawyer. The one you've been looking for weeks without finding. The one who has been legally documenting every single one of your crimes. I hung up the phone and looked at them with a smile that made them tremble. At this very moment, 3 legal processes are being activated against you simultaneously. First, a civil lawsuit for psychological abuse and threats against a senior citizen. Second, a criminal complaint for conspiracy to commit fraud and illegal appropriation of assets. Third, a restraining order that prohibits you from coming near me or my property. I saw the color completely drain from their faces. But that's not all, I continued, enjoying every second of their terror. I have also filed a lawsuit against you for defamation, specifically for the lies you told Dr. Matthews about my mental state. Angela stood up, staggering. This is insane. You can't destroy our lives over a family misunderstanding. A family misunderstanding? I repeated, incredulous. Threatening to kill me is a family misunderstanding? Planning to steal my inheritance is a minor domestic problem? Mark tried to approach me, but something in my expression stopped him. Mom, please. I'm all you have. Without me, you'll be completely alone. His words hit me, but not in the way he expected. They hurt me because they revealed how little he truly knew me. Alone? I laughed, a laugh that sounded liberated. You think being away from people who hate me and want to rob me is being alone? For the first time in years, I feel accompanied by my dignity, by my self-respect, by my strength. Besides, I added, pulling out another document, I'm not alone at all. I have real friends, people who genuinely appreciate me, people who never saw my age as a business opportunity. The document was a letter of recommendation from the book club I had started attending in the city, people my age who had become true friends, who valued my company without ulterior motives. Do you know what the difference is between my real friends and you? I asked. They are happy when I arrive, you are happy when I leave. They enjoy my company. You endure my existence. They see me as a valuable person. You see me as a walking bank account. Mark collapsed on the sofa, finally understanding he had lost all control of the situation. What do you want us to do? He asked in a defeated voice. What do I want you to do? I repeated thoughtfully. I want you to get out of my house immediately and never come back. I want you to return the copies of the keys you have. I want you to remove all your belongings by noon. And after that? Angela asked in a broken voice. After that, you're going to face the legal consequences of your actions. You're going to explain to a judge why you threatened a 69-year-old woman. You're going to explain to a prosecutor why you planned to steal my property. You're going to explain to a jury why you considered my death a financial opportunity. I watched as the reality of their situation began to fully sink into their brains. There was no escape, no negotiation, no way to turn this into a family misunderstanding. But there's more, I added with a smile that made them pale even more. My new friends from the book club include a retired journalist from the city's main newspaper. She found your story absolutely fascinating. Mark jumped to his feet. What do you mean? I mean the story of an adopted son who threatens and plans to rob his adoptive mother is going to be front-page news next Sunday. The son who wanted to kill the mother who saved him from the orphanage. It has a very catchy title, don't you think? Angela began to hyperventilate. You can't do that. Mark has a job, a reputation. I work at a school. This will destroy our careers. Your careers? I exclaimed with false surprise. Are you worried about your careers? Weren't you worried about my life when you were planning my accidents? Weren't you worried about my well-being when you were planning to lock me in a nursing home against my will? Mark tried one last desperate resort. Mom, we can leave the country. We can disappear and never bother you again. But please, don't destroy our lives publicly. Leave the country? I laughed. As fugitives? Is that your grand solution? To run away like criminals? Please, Angela pleaded. We're young. We can change. We can learn from this. Young, I repeated ironically. Mark is 35. You are 32. You're not teenagers who made a mistake. You are adults who systematically planned the robbery and abuse of an elderly woman. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. You have exactly 5 minutes to get off my property. If you don't do so voluntarily, I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Mark approached me with tears in his eyes. Mom, You raised me. You loved me. No, I interrupted him firmly. I raised you. I loved you. You pretended to love me while you waited for me to die to inherit my assets. There is a fundamental difference. Please, one last chance, he implored. A last chance for what? To threaten me more subtly? To rob me more discreetly? To plan my death more carefully? Angela tried to hug me, but I stepped back immediately. Don't touch me. You have no right to touch me. You lost that right when you decided to see my body as an obstacle between you and my money. Mark picked up the nursing home papers I had torn and looked at them with desperation, as if they were his last connection to the plan that had crumbled. You know what's the most ironic part of all this? I asked as I watched them gather their things. If you had simply loved me genuinely, if you had treated me with respect and affection, I would have voluntarily left you everything when I died. But your greed blinded you so much that you destroyed the one thing that could have given you what you wanted. The truth of those words hit them like a hammer. They realized their own avarice had destroyed the possibility of legitimately getting what they so desperately desired. Now, I said, looking at my watch, you have 3.5 minutes to get off my property before I call the police. I watched them leave my house like the criminals they were, dragging their belongings and their shattered dignity. When Mark turned to look at me one last time from the door, what he saw in my eyes made him understand that the woman who had raised, loved, and protected him for 30 years had died to him forever. Goodbye, Mark, I said in a final voice. Have the life you deserve. And I closed the door. A week later, Mark tried his last desperate resort. Since he could no longer contact me directly due to the restraining order, he decided to do something that definitively proved he had learned nothing from what had happened. He created a profile on a social media platform and began to live stream, trying to manipulate public opinion. My neighbor Linda called me, terrified. Carol, you have to see this. Mark is live on the internet, saying horrible things about you. I logged on from my apartment in the city and couldn't believe what I was seeing. There he was, sitting in what appeared to be a cheap apartment, his eyes red from crying, speaking to the camera in a broken voice. My adoptive mother has gone crazy, he said, fake tears streaming down his cheeks. The woman who raised me, who loved me for 30 years, is now accusing me of terrible things I never did. Her age is affecting her mind, and she can't recognize reality. The live comments began to fill with messages of support. Poor boy. Old people sometimes become paranoid. It must be so painful to see your mother in that state. Mark continued with his perfect performance. Angela and I just wanted to help her. We saw that she could no longer take care of herself in that big house, that she was spending money she didn't have to maintain a property that was physically beyond her. We just wanted her to be safe, cared for, with specialized people. But when we suggested some options for places where she could be better off, she interpreted everything as if we were criminals. Now she says we threatened her, that we want to rob her, that we plan to hurt her. It's heartbreaking to see how her mind is fabricating these paranoid fantasies. The comments multiplied. Your mother is sick, son. Senile dementia is terrible. You should seek medical help for her. Mark kept feeding the narrative. The worst part is that she now has lawyers who are taking advantage of her mental confusion. Unscrupulous people who are filling her head with ideas about legal processes and lawsuits. They are exploiting a vulnerable older woman to get money out of her. It was a masterful performance. Every word calculated to present himself as the innocent victim of a senile mother and corrupt lawyers. Every tear perfectly timed to generate compassion. If anyone knows my mother, Carol Garcia, please let her know that I love her. That I will always love her no matter what her illness makes her believe about me. That I am here waiting for the day she regains her lucidity and can once again be the loving mother she always was. The comments were overwhelmingly sympathetic. You are a wonderful son. Your mother is very lucky to have you. Don't give up. Love always wins. It was then that I decided it was time to enter the game. I created my own profile on the same platform and started my own live stream. In less than 5 minutes, several of Mark's followers had found my stream, and comments began to pour in. Hello, I said in a calm, clear voice. My name is Carol Garcia. I am the senile mother Mark is talking about in his stream, and I have a few things to show you. The comments immediately exploded. It's her, the crazy mother. Poor thing, she doesn't know what she's saying. First, I continued in a firm voice. I want you to know that I am perfectly sane. I have here a medical certificate from Dr. Matthews, dated last week, which confirms that I am mentally and physically capable of managing all my affairs. I held the document up to the camera so they could see the official seal. Second, I want to play for you some recordings of the conversations I had with my dear adopted son, so you can judge for yourselves who is telling the truth. I pressed play on the first recording. Mark's voice filled the stream. At your age, living alone in this big house, a lot of accidents can happen. The stairs are dangerous for an older person. The comments immediately changed. What was that? That sounded like a threat. Wait, is he threatening his mother? That was a direct threat, I explained calmly. Now listen to this one. I played the recording where Mark said, when the old woman dies, we're going to be rich. This property is worth a fortune. The silence in the comments was deafening. Then completely different messages began to appear. Oh my God, what a horrible son. He was planning to rob her. I have hours of recordings like these, I continued. Conversations where they plan to have me declared mentally incompetent, where they discuss how to sell my property, where they refer to me as the old woman and plan my death as a convenient financial event. The comments became an avalanche of outrage against Mark. What a monster. Poor woman. How could he do that to his mother? But that's not all, I added. I also have this. I held up the photographs of the documents Mark had buried in my yard. These are photos of legal documents that my son stole from my personal safe and buried in my yard at 3 in the morning. Documents he planned to use to have me declared incompetent and take control of my assets. The comments were furious now. Call the police. That guy is a criminal. Poor woman. What a nightmare. And finally, I said with a smile, I want to show you something that Mark doesn't know I have. I held up the property title to my apartment in the city. This is a property I inherited 8 months ago and is worth $500,000. Mark didn't know about this inheritance when he was planning to steal my main house. It turns out the senile old woman who can't take care of herself owns 2 properties and has a bank account he never imagined. The comments exploded. What a plot twist. The lady is smarter than her son. Mark is an idiot as well as a criminal. Oh, I added casually, and I'm also a partial owner of 3 local businesses that I bought with part of my inheritance. It turns out this poor old woman, who needed to be locked in a nursing home, has a net worth of over $1 million. The stream went viral in real time. The comments were coming so fast it was impossible to read them, but the tone was unanimously supportive of me and condemnatory of Mark. To finish, I said, looking directly at the camera, I want to send a message to my dear adopted son who is surely watching this. Mark, you said your mother had gone crazy. You were right. I went crazy for allowing you to disrespect me for 30 years. I went crazy sacrificing my well-being for someone who only saw my death as a business opportunity. I took a dramatic pause. But now I have regained my sanity. And with this sanity comes the determination to ensure that you face all the legal consequences of your actions. The documents I have filed with the district attorney include all these recordings. On Monday morning, you will be arrested for elder abuse, threats of violence, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The comments became a celebration. Justice! Get him arrested! You are a warrior, Carol. To everyone watching, I continued, I want you to know that older adults are not helpless victims waiting to be exploited. We can be intelligent, prepared, and when necessary, we can be absolutely ruthless in defending our dignity. I ended the stream with over 50,000 viewers and thousands of comments of support. In less than an hour, clips from my stream were being shared on all social media platforms. Mark had tried to destroy my reputation publicly, but he had achieved the exact opposite. His own stream became a source of ridicule. The comments on his video were now completely different. Liar, your mother destroyed you. What a disgrace. Mark had lost the digital war spectacularly. His attempt to manipulate public opinion had turned into his most absolute humiliation. On Monday morning, exactly as I had promised in my viral stream, Mark was arrested at his apartment. The images appeared on all the local news channels. The son who had tried to rob and abuse his adoptive mother, being handcuffed while neighbors watched with contempt. Angela was also arrested at her workplace. The school where she taught immediately suspended her when they found out about the charges. A teacher accused of planning the abuse of an older adult was not exactly the image they wanted to project. But the real justice came 3 months later, during the public trial. The prosecutor had built an overwhelming case using all my recordings, the buried documents, the testimony of Dr. Matthews, and the documented lies they had told about my mental state. The day I testified was the most satisfying moment of this whole nightmare. I entered that courtroom dressed in an elegant green suit I had bought especially for the occasion, carrying a folder with all the evidence of my real assets and with my dignity completely restored. Mark sat at the defendant's table, unrecognizable from the man who had believed he controlled my life. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles, and his cheap suit couldn't hide the desperation he radiated. When the prosecutor asked me to recount the events, I spoke in a clear and firm voice. Every word I said resonated in that room like a hammer of justice. For months, the defendants developed a systematic plan to strip me of my assets and my freedom, I began. They used my age as a pretext to treat me as if I were mentally incompetent. They threatened my physical integrity. They lied to medical professionals to obtain false documentation. And they planned my death as if it were a convenient financial event. The jury listened with growing horror as they played the recordings. The voice of Mark saying, "When the old woman dies, we're going to be rich," echoed in that room like a confession of absolute guilt. When it was the defense attorney's turn to cross-examine me, he tried to paint me as a vengeful woman who had misinterpreted her son's loving intentions. "Mrs. Garcia," he asked me in a condescending tone, "isn't it possible that you misinterpreted your son's legitimate concerns about your well-being?" My answer was devastating. "Sir, when someone plans your death to inherit your assets, when they threaten you with physical accidents, when they steal legal documents from your personal safe, when they lie to doctors about your mental state, when they refer to you as the old woman who should die soon, there is no possible misinterpretation. There is criminal planning. The lawyer tried another angle. Don't you consider that maybe your son was just worried because you, at 69 years old, live alone in a large property? My age is not a disability, I replied in a firm voice, and my ability to live independently is medically documented. But more importantly, my financial capacity to maintain my lifestyle is more than proven. It was then that the prosecutor asked me to reveal my true financial situation. With great satisfaction, I presented to the court all the documents that proved my real net worth. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I said, addressing them, in addition to the estate the defendants wanted to steal from me, I own an apartment in the city valued at $500,000. I have bank accounts totaling $300,000. And I am a partial partner in 3 businesses that generate a monthly income of $4,000. The silence in the room was total. Mark slumped in his chair upon hearing numbers he had never imagined. The defendants, I continued, planned to rob a woman they believed to be vulnerable and without resources. In reality, they tried to scam someone whose net worth exceeds $1.5 million. Their criminal incompetence is as evident as their lack of moral scruples. The verdict was unanimous and swift. Mark was sentenced to 5 years in prison for elder abuse, threats of violence, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Angela received 3 years for complicity. Both were ordered to pay $200,000 in compensation for psychological damages and defamation. But the real justice came later, when their lives completely fell apart. Mark lost his job when his employer found out about the criminal charges. No one wants to hire someone convicted of abusing their own adoptive mother. Angela not only lost her job as a teacher, but was also placed on a list that prohibits her from working with minors or older adults. Her educational career was over forever. The cheap apartment where they lived was foreclosed on when they couldn't pay the mortgage without their jobs. Their few friends abandoned them when the story went viral. Even their own families were ashamed to be associated with them. Meanwhile, I flourished in my new life. My apartment in the city became my perfect refuge. I had respectful neighbors, top-quality medical services, endless cultural activities, and most importantly, absolute peace. I joined 3 different clubs, one for reading, one for gardening, and one for financial investments. I met wonderful people who genuinely valued my company without ulterior motives. With part of the money I had kept secret, I decided to completely remodel my original estate. I turned it into a guest house for older adults who had been abandoned by their families. A place where people like me could live with dignity, respect, and genuine affection. The irony was perfect. The house Mark had wanted to steal from me became a refuge for victims of family abuse. A place where no one would be treated as a burden or an inconvenience. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison. It was from Mark, of course. A pathetic letter full of pleas and false apologies. "Dear Mom," it began, "I've had a lot of time to reflect on my mistakes. I realize that I misinterpreted the situation, that maybe I was too insistent on the topic of your move. But everything came from love, from the desire to protect you. Every line was more manipulative than the last. He tried to rewrite history, to turn his criminal threats into family misunderstandings. I know you can find it in your heart to forgive your son who made mistakes, but who always loved you. When I get out of here, I want to rebuild our relationship. I want to prove that I am the son I deserve to be." The letter ended with a desperate plea. "Please, visit me. I need to see you. I need you to know that this has all been a terrible misunderstanding that we can overcome together." My response was simple and final. I sent him a single line. "Monsters do not deserve second chances." I never had contact with him again. Now, a year after that morning, when I saw them burying documents in my yard, I am living the fullest and most satisfying life I have had in decades. I have real friends, projects that excite me, financial security, and something I hadn't had in years: absolute respect for myself. My guest house is home to 12 older adults who had been mistreated by their families. Each story is different, but they all share the same common thread: children, grandchildren, or relatives who saw their age as an opportunity instead of wisdom. I learned something fundamental during this experience. True love does not require us to destroy ourselves for others. Kindness does not mean allowing abuse. And protecting yourself is not selfishness, it is survival. I don't regret adopting Mark. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction, that giving love does not mean giving away your dignity, and that being a mother does not mean being a victim. Today I am 70 years old, and I have never felt more powerful, more respected, more alive. Mark believed my age was my weakness. It turned out to be my most devastating strength. Because an older woman who no longer has anything to lose is the most dangerous force in the universe.